guys, and welcome back to another episode of Your Brains Coach podcast. My name is Angela Sharina. I'm your host. I'm your brains coach. And here we are again to learn all the brain tools you can use to feel, look, and do your absolute best. Guys, and I have a treat for you today. We have another amazing guest. His name is Paul Zak, Dr. Paul Zak. He is a professor at Claremont Graduate University and is ranked in the top of 0.3% of most cited scientists with over 180 published papers and more than 19,000 citations to his research. Paul's 2 decades of research have taken him from the Pentagon to Fortune 50 boardrooms. Along the way, he helped to start a number of interdisciplinary fields, including neuroeconomics, neuromanagement, and neuromarketing. He has written 3 general audience books and is a regular TED speaker. His newest book is Immersion. And by the way, this is the book that we're going to be talking about today. Immersion, the Science of Extraordinary and Source of Happiness. Paul is also a 4-time tech entrepreneur. His current company, Immersion Neuroscience, is a software platform that allows anyone to measure what the brain loves in real time to improve outcomes in entertainment, education, and training, live events, and to help people sustain emotional wellness. He frequently appears in the media in such places as Good Morning America, Dr. Phil, Fox and Friends, ABC Evening News, and his work has been reported in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Time, The Economist, Scientific American, Fast Company, Forbes, and various podcasts. Fun fact, he is a member of the Screen Actors Guild and has created dialogues for 2 movies. So guys, today's podcast, you're going to learn so much from our conversation. With Paul, we're going to start with the conversation about oxytocin and how it makes us more persuasive when we are able to boost the release of oxytocin in other people through our interaction or experiences that we create for people. We're going to be talking about this technology that Paul and his team created that allows Paul's team to measure different brain signals and oxytocin, including to, in real time, tell what people's brains actually love and how much the attention they're paying to the experience and how emotionally connected they are. And all with the purpose to figure out how to create the most impactful marketing pieces, content pieces, movies, advertising, all with the purpose to help people to learn something or to be emotionally moved, to take action, to be changed, and to change something in the world. Very powerful technology that, from my perspective, allows to give a little bit more precision to all of our efforts to create impact, to change people's minds, right? On this podcast, Paul will share this formula that will allow you to create better educational experiences or again marketing or movies or pieces of content, more immersive experiences where people on the other side pay attention and they're emotionally engaged, involved, and they're so much more likely to take action on this piece of content that you are delivering. We're also going to talk about how immersion, this immersive experiences when people pay attention and when they are emotionally connected to the experience, how immersion helps people to stay present, to build more meaningful connections, and to have happier, more meaningful lives that will, of course, affect also their health and their fitness and the meaning in their work that they do. We'll also talk about how Paul's technology can help people to find what they love about the work, or maybe find the work that they love, and how it can help companies to create this experience for people, for employees, where people most of the time do what they love, delivering more outcomes, more results, right? So this is one fascinating podcast where you're going to learn a lot of practical stuff that you can then take into your work to help more people, to impact more people, and ultimately to change the world. But also this podcast will help you to create more meaningful and joyful life experience for yourself and people around you. So without further ado, please stay tuned, connect, and enjoy our immersive conversation with Paul Zak. Well, thank you for saying yes to my invitation and coming as a guest to Your Brain's Coach podcast. It's amazing for me. You agreed so fast, and I was so happy to be able, to connect and to ask you all the questions that I got about your work. So thank you.
Of course.
Paul, I don't know. I want to just jump right into your work, if you don't mind. So I got all of your books, the moral molecule, how trust works, and the trust factor about high-performing companies. But what started me on actually reading all of the books, usually I tend to get a lot of books and start reading them a little bit later, is your latest book, Immersion, the Science of Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. And I think I read the introduction to the book, and, I'm an educator. I love to learn and love to share this knowledge. I love to help people. I'm like, this sounds like a book that actually can work, can actually help me to get better at that, right? At creating impact, at helping more people, because you use science. I've got through a lot of marketing courses and stuff, and it always felt like guessing. Whereas your book, it felt like there is so much more than guessing, like there is actual science of that. So maybe let's start with, how did you start? It seems like it's been a journey with your books. You started with, one research, and then you continued and still continuing to make progress.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Angela. It's very kind of you to say that. So first of all, I'm a Martian. I don't understand the humans. And so I run experiments to try to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And if they could tell me why they did something, I'd be fine with that. And so a technique we've used is to have people make decisions in the laboratory. Decisions are a great way to really probe the way the brain works and measure brain activity while people make those decisions. So particular decisions I was interested in are social decisions. So there's just a ton of research on the sort of the bad behaviors, stress and competition, but there was actually very little understanding of why humans engage in pro-social behaviors, helping behaviors, why we're trustworthy, why we're generous, why we're charitable. And that seemed like that was a big missing hole in life. And it seems like ultimately a good question. Like, how do we live around all these other humans who are strangers without completely freaking out when almost all of our primate relatives cannot stand to be around conspecifics they don't know? And so in the late 90s, early 2000s, I developed a protocol, I think the first protocol to measure the brain's acute production of oxytocin, this neurochemical that a lot of people have heard about now. So my research kind of opened that up by saying, okay, here's a way to do this. And now we can actually ask a lot of questions. And then as we went further, we started asking what promotes or inhibits this response. And then finally, how do we influence other people, which is what social creatures do all the time, right? You mentioned marketing. We're always trying to have an impact. But, I've been married 27 years. I still want my wife to be nice to me. And if I'm a total jerk for a long period of time or a short period of time, she's going to say, I've had it with this guy. So we're constantly in that persuasion mode. So long story short, around 2014, the U.S. Department of Defense's research arm, DARPA, had a program that sought to identify signals in the brain, combination of signals in the brain that would accurately and consistently predict what people would do after a message or an experience. And so ultimately, the Department of Defense and a bunch of other agencies with 3 letters funded our research that sought to give them a test bed to train soldiers and other operators to be more effectively persuasive. Tell me where the bad guys are, or please help us, get through this valley, whatever that is. Long story short, what we eventually discovered is what I think is the brain's evaluation mechanism for experiences that have a social component, whether that's shopping, whether that's talking to my therapist, whether that's watching a movie or being in a classroom, all that has social content, and these signals, these combinations of signals, do predict with 85 to 90% accuracy what individuals will do, and also, interestingly, what markets will do. So it will predict aggregate behaviors because the signals we're capturing are deep in the brainstem, and they're very strongly conserved across humans. And so if, 35 humans love this movie, pretty much the rest of the humans are too.
And you're talking about these mechanisms. Like, can you maybe be a little bit more specific, but not too scientific, so we still understand what you're talking about? Like, you mentioned in your book that, and right now, that you are able to measure, those signals. Like, what others? Are there some electrical signals or related to oxytocin? I think I couldn't really understand like the specifics of that mechanism, and I was curious.
Right. So for listeners, we started with about 140 electrical signals, both from the brain itself and from the peripheral nervous system. And ultimately, we found that the brain's output files, these cranial nerves, capture the network effect of these two key components that we discovered neurochemically and neuroelectrically. One is I've got to pay attention, right? If I'm talking to you, Angela, I can pay attention here, or I can do something over here, but I can't do both.
Yeah.
And the second is you've got to get me to actually emotionally engage with this experience, right? So I have to actually care about it. And that state in which I'm attentive, which is associated with dopamine release, and I'm really connected emotionally to it, which is associated with oxytocin, is a very weird neurologic state. So I gave it a special name, immersion. This is why, not me, Angela, because I'm way too macho, but I've heard that some people cry at movies at the end. Like, neurologically, that's super weird to me, right? As a Martian, because, this is a fictional story, these are paid actors, you're cognitively intact, this is a theater. And yet at the end of the movie, the boy gets the girl, people cry. That's an example of immersion. You've been so sucked in, transported into this story. It's as if that experience is happening to you. And again, that's what social creatures do. So we developed a technology to measure that in real time using algorithms applied to smartwatches and fitness sensors like this. And so basically, it's like putting a speedometer on people's brains. And once we built a platform, every day, hundreds of people having their brains measured via our platform and smartwatches. So the book is based on 50,000 brain observations. But nobody has that because no one's built a platform that essentially democratizes neuroscience.
Yeah, that's, what I read on your website, Neuroscience as a Service, like, you're the first company. I'm like, that is so amazing. I'm a huge fan of neuroscience. I'm reading everything that's coming out, and that you're able to put it in technology to measure something, wireless, as I understand it, right? And specifically emotional response and how people pay attention to things and why. That's that for me, it's like just mind blowing, it's next level. And
I really love your work because you focus on the embodied brain, right? So I think that's the key, is that it's not like your brain is floating, away from the rest of your body. There's these feedback loops, and that the cranial nerves are the key pathway of that feedback. So I think in your work, that too, that you don't have a healthy body, you're not going to have a healthy brain. And if your brain's not healthy, generally your body's not going to be healthy either. So there's this feedback loop. Like ancient Greeks talked about this, right? About the importance of exercise and all that to keep you mentally fit.
Just like, with genius work like yours, now you can be more specific and measure it and then apply it, because it's good to understand the theory or principles and kind of half guess it, but it's so much more powerful when you can be more precise, right, about the application. And what I loved about your book, you go chapter by chapter through different applications. Like you start where do you start? Ads or entertainment? I don't remember specifically, and
marketing.
how.
Marketing. Most of it's terrible, awful, right?
Yes, you can expand more on that. You mentioned, that all the messages that people use in marketing or any messaging that when we're trying to persuade people or make people pay attention, that it's all about, that emotional response that we need to design for, right? And I also loved in your book that you give like specific guidelines or tools or kind of like formula, right? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, if I were to design an experience, or let's say a piece of content for, great impact, emotional resonance, to produce action in people, like, where would I start?
Yeah, great question. And I think the basis for measuring the brain directly is because otherwise we're still with asking people what they think. Like, do you like this? Again, liking is a really weird question to me as a Martian. Like, liking compared to what? Liking compared to my kids? Actually, my kids talk back to me. My dog is perfect, right? My dog is, so how can I compare an ad or a movie to my dog, my perfect dog? It's just, it's the wrong question. And the reason for that is because we're asking people to report their unconscious emotional experiences that are just too deep in the brain. You don't know. Some people just have to lie because they're just unaware. Yeah. So we know, because we have so much data, then sort of general principles come out so that the book is useful for people without any measurements, right? Because here's, after seeing so many of this. So the first thing is I call staging. Set the stage. If you think of going to a movie, what happens in a movie theater? The lights come down. We ask people to turn off their phones, right? We're creating an environment. So the first thing is create a little bit of space to have that impact. And then the second is to understand that the brain's a very lazy organ because it takes so much energy to run. So if you're going to start out with something that's going to shake up my brain and get me excited about doing something, open hot, give me a reason to care, right? So think of every James Bond movie ever made. It's always James Bond, running across a roof with bullets flying at his feet and saving some woman who's going to get killed. And, you're like, holy crap, like, what the hell is, now I want to see this movie. So, same thing with persuasive communication. Open hot, give me a reason to care about this. The next step is to then have a human scale story with authentic emotions. And so if you're trying to sell a product or service, that story should be related to the product or service. It shouldn't just be a little story and then buy our stuff. It has nothing to do with it. So human scale story, not a story at macro level, story about one or two humans, a crisis they have those show emotions. So that narrative arc is a really effective way to keep people immersed in the story. Now you've captured them emotionally, right? The hot open is the dopamine response, and then get them to care, like, oh, wow. So we're not stopping watching movies or TV, we still want more stories. We learn from stories. Fictional stories help us imagine experiences that we may not have been in, and therefore we're potentially more effective. So we're fascinated by the other humans. So tell a story about humans, and then have those humans have some kind of crisis that is resolved. Again, if you're selling a product or service, the product or service resolves that crisis. Boom! Now you've related the emotional tagging of that experience to an action. And the key is you've put a bunch of tension into people's brains. Ask them to buy now or do something now or agree to help you now. So I'm shocked by how many advertisements that run on linear TV are put on online in YouTube and no one drops in a hyperlink.
Yeah.
Great commercial. What am I supposed to do now? Where the hell do I buy this product? Have a link right there. Like right now, do it.
And the timing, that's important, right? That's what I understood. Like you hear all the time, like call to action. But when you put it, right, in that like cycle of immersion, of emotional response, that seems to be very important, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also what we find is that if you close that narrative arc, you've decreased the immersion. So that call to action should be at an immersion peak. That's when it's going to have the most impact. And so, branding, they should be immersion peaks. That's what people remember the most. So, as you know, if, any highly emotional event is saved in the brain in a very particular way, and it's easily recalled because that's an important experience. But, that's kind of the rehearsing, right? That's what we're doing with this storytelling, like in the fictional world storytelling. But it's also got to be relevant to you. So if that experience of that ad, that persuasive message is relevant to you, then the term in neuroscience is top-down control. Actually, the top part of the brain, the cortex, pushes more energy into those emotional lower parts of the brain. You go, holy crap, this is great. So I can show you the best commercial for Huggies diapers. If you don't have little infants at home, it's just like, oh, cute babies. And then your brain flushes that out to like lots of information. But if you have babies and you see that commercial, go, oh, Huggies. Yeah, maybe I should buy some more of those Huggies. Right. So it's really relevant to you. So relevance increases immersion.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like if I were at a cocktail party and I'm talking to you, Angela, and I'm talking to you about something that you've never heard about. That's just, you just be like, you don't even know what to say, right? I know I'm talking about
Yeah.
ancient Greek history and the Peloponnesian Wars, and you're like, I think I remember that from school, and you're like, why is this? As opposed to, hey, yesterday I heard that something happened, or
Mm-hmm.
if it's not relevant to you, then you just kind of space out. So again, that lazy brain is just evaluating: is this information useful for
Yeah.
me? Should I actually spend any energy thinking about this thing?
Yeah. And I often think, also about just daily communication. We often start talking to other people about like our life and something that's totally not related to their life. And a lot of people start paying attention to something else because like, yeah, but that's kind of not related to what I'm going through. Right. And I remind myself all the time, like, how can I connect that to the person in front of me
Right.
so they pay
Yeah.
attention?
That conversation is a gift to that person. You should be talking about what they care about, right? Not what you care about. Now, hopefully there's some overlap there,
Yeah.
but yeah, think about that gift. And even the gift of listening. I call this listening
Mm-hmm.
with your eyes. When
Mm-hmm.
you're talking to someone and you really give them your full attention. So you're making yourself fully present. So one of the kind of motifs of the book, which is perhaps surprising, every book should have some surprises, some secrets in it,
Yeah.
is that we have evidence from our lab and others that when you have these peak immersion experiences, when they start to build up, you actually train your brain to be fully present, to be
Mm-hmm.
emotionally available. And individuals with those traits have more friends, they have richer social lives, they live longer and live healthier. So, from a
Mm-hmm.
business perspective, if I create a great experience for you, an extraordinary experience, I'm increasing loyalty, customer lifetime value. But also, I think there's a sacred contract between experience creators and the individuals who experience them, because you're potentially improving their lives, making them happier and healthier. So that's
Yeah.
super cool.
You know what it made me think about? You're probably familiar. I heard it first on Andy Huberman's podcast about how people are happier the more moments of presence they have. Like if they ask, a lot of people like what they were doing and whether they were happy or not. And it didn't matter what they were doing, but if they were present, they would always refer back that they were happier compared to when their mind was wandering, right? Like just thinking about something else not related to their experience. And it makes me think that that's what immersion does. Like it brings you to the present moment, and that's how it increases your happiness.
Yeah, and most of the time our brains are just scanning the environment for kind of stuff, and it's again, we say pay attention, right? It is
Yeah.
costly to be attentive and to be emotionally available, but one way to do that is to have a kind of a social layer. So when you
Mm-hmm.
have that social component, so I give the story in the book of my daughter and I, who was maybe 15 at the time, taking a train from London out to Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's way out the middle of nowhere, and so you got to take a train, you got to take a bus, and anyway, it was a couple hours, and we had this conversation about the best meals I've ever had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I could just tick these off, like I had one amazing one in Bogota, I had one in London, I had one in Paris. And I could tell her about why I was there, who I was with, and she goes, I don't think it was the food. I think it was the experience. And she was exactly right. Of course she's right. Of course the food was great, but why do I
Yeah.
remember that? Just like you said, Angela, it's because the entire package was there. It was amazing people. I was on some crazy trip. I speak a lot, so I was probably giving some talk, or some of these were TED Talks I gave,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. You're on stage and people clap, and you get all this kind of love, and then you go have dinner with a bunch of them. Like, okay, what's better than that? Like, that's a peak experience for sure.
Yeah. And it kind of like colors everything else that is included, right? Including meal. And that's why I remember it as
Yes,
the
exactly.
best meal or one of the best meals. So would you add, back to that formula, would you add something else like, I don't know, to the formula, like, staging and then stories and then relevance to, to the person or people who are watching that. Is there anything else that you would add to, I guess, increase the immersion that people might use in their content or, marketing or something
Yeah.
else, education?
So in the book, I actually have a formula, which is
Yeah.
SIRTA, SIRTA. So it's
Mm-hmm.
staging, The I is tell an immersive story. The R is make it relevant to you. T is for targeting. Think about who needs the story the most, right? So what we often see in ads and other communications is that, or movies, is that its immersion's okay, it's average, but there's a subset of people who absolutely dig it so much, their brains are so turned on. And so that's where you want to kind of focus that conversation, right? So find those individuals, and oftentimes they're not who you think you are. I'll give you an example in a second. And the last one is have a call to action, implicit or explicit call to action. Again, I have created this great experience for you. What do I do next? Sign up for our newsletter, buy our product, post on social media, connect with me on LinkedIn. All those things help me feel like me, the listener, feel like I'm now expanding on that experience. It makes actually more valuable. So for people who are selling things or marketers, the call to action is the thing that kind of seals the deal. Like, okay, I'm all in now. Let me do it now, which is great. So let me go back to the targeting example. So here's a concrete example. It's in the book. There was this movie that came out a few years ago based on a young adult novel called The Fault in Our Stars. It's about two teenagers who fall in love with cancer. It's an amazing movie. So it cost $12 million to make. It earned $307 million at the box office. Why? So young adult, and the love story, primarily in the market is teenage girls. So what happened is these marketers realized what their market was. And they already had the book out there, which was a bestseller. So they had kind of built-in market. But they had all these events. So what you saw was that girls would go in groups and go and see the movie 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And so how do you sell that? How is the experience better? Well, they had contests. So the states in the US that posted the most things about that movie, the stars of the movie would come visit and have a meet and greet in that state. Oh, that's great. These girls love the movie. Then they had, instead of the normal, whatever, $15 movie, they had these special $25 showings where after the movie, by video link, the stars would go live and ask questions. So that's a nice scalable solution. So there was a reason to keep coming back. And these super fans just drove this movie to be, an amazing, best, selling movie. So again, think about the normal movie, pitches. Like, you see the movie trailer, it's pretty good. But they had that call to action. We want you to experience this again, and we're going to add something to it. So they created super fans, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and those super fans, they then drive a lot more enthusiasm usually, right? And I think that's also, what kind of relevant to what you hear in marketing is like, first, especially if you don't have, huge budget, like try to figure out that, your core audience is like fans who then will drive the traction, right? Instead of, trying to be general and appeal to everyone. And that usually ends up appealing to no one. So I find, a lot of like connections between what you're saying here and what you hear in marketing. But again, like you have more data and more specific tools to actually apply then to different content or whatever it is, person trying to do.
Yeah. And I think I'll tell you the most exciting stuff to me, the marketing's great. And I live outside LA. 80% of Hollywood movies have lost money for the last 30 years. That's just, I think, lack of a tool, as you said. But we just published research late September showing that individuals who have more of these peak immersion experiences have fewer depressive symptoms. They are generally happier. They get sick less often. And so, having amazing experiences, curating your life for greater satisfaction, greater engagement with others really is important. And so, again, I think there's a kind of a business case here, but there's also a kind of social good case here that, who wants to go to the DMV and get the license renewed is awful. Why isn't that experience fabulous? Why isn't, I don't know. Why is there so many mundane or frustrating experiences? It's just depressing. I remember I was flying home from Rio de Janeiro once, and I've been in Brazil for like a week, and I'm excited to go home. And this lady, and I'm flying in business, right? So I paid, I don't know, $8,000 for this ticket. And this lady checking my passport in the Rio airport, and Brazilians are generally super nice.
Yeah.
She looks so sad. I'm like, are you okay? Because I'm super excited to be here, but you look like you're getting murdered. Like, what is happening with you? And she's like, nothing. It was just like, oh man, like you got to get a different job. Like this is not, you're not a customer service person. You're bringing me down. And for me, like when you fly and it's, I don't know how long this flight is. It's probably 15 hours or 14 hours. Like I'm going to watch a movie. I have a couple nice meals. I'm going to sleep. I'm happy. I'm happy to be going home. It's going to be a great experience. And, that one person just kind of ruined it. So again, not good for the customer, but also think of this poor woman who's in some job that maybe she's just having a bad day. Maybe her dog died or something, but she's in a job that she just doesn't love. So one of the most interesting things in the book, I think, is what I call neural job crafting, right? Measuring your brain activity, find out what you love to do. And when you love doing it, you're just going to do it better and you'll enjoy it more. So, it's that the term of art now is EX to CX, employee experience to customer experience. So I think that's really important. And particularly now when we have, labor shortages around the world, let's help people find what they love to do.
So I don't think I remember exactly. Do you usually do that for the companies, like using maybe applying your technology to help figure out like where do people do best at work? Like what experiences produce the, I don't know, most joy for people?
Yeah. So link your calendar with your immersion data, and then, then you'll actually be able to see yourself. And what I like about this is it really empowers employees to have a different discussion with their supervisors. So you have the supervisor saying, Angela, we're short some accountants. So you got to do accounting this week. You're like, man, I guess so. Now you can go to your supervisor and go, hey, you know what? Thanks for getting us this immersion platform. So I measure myself for the last month. It turns out I love working with clients, and accounting, not so much. So if you have a big enough organization, then start to reorganize around what people love to do, right? That would be awesome. That's the world I want to live in.
Yeah, me too. And today in the morning, I was doing a podcast with a woman, her name is Frederica, and she wrote this book, Brain Friendly Workplace. And she also talks about neurodiversity, right? But she also talks about like how we should job craft according to people's neurosignature, like what job they enjoy, and we should, connect that. But I think your technology will help to, again, make it more precise and measure, and without guessing, actually give the data, right? So this is how my brain works when my brain works the best. So let me do more of these things, because that will help me to be more productive and bring, more value to the company.
And more satisfaction for the employee. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is, when we master tasks, we can do like driving, right? When you master that task, then you can start doing other things. And so innovation often comes from people having mastery and then having the space to go, okay, so we're doing this way. How would I do this differently? And so that's where neural job crafting really creates a lot of innovation, a lot of value for that company as well, and for the employee.
Yeah. And that, doesn't usually happen if you most of the time hate your job, right? You're not going to be mastering or coming out with insights for whatever it is you're doing. So that's, I think that can help you unlock more people's potential and talent at workplace. I also, wanted to ask you about education. You have a whole chapter dedicated to education and better, more impactful education with immersion, right? Can you tell our listeners a little bit more how, as an educator, for example, one can craft the experience for the listener, for the learner, to create more immersion, right? We usually create an agenda, and then we will go point by point, trying to explain certain things, and that usually ends up being very boring for most people, and people end up not learning that much. Like how to do it better.
So, and to be totally transparent, again, I'm not an expert in education, but because we have a software platform that anybody can use, many years ago, and this is all public knowledge, Accenture, which spends $1 billion a year training their employees or upskilling their employees. One of the great learning architects there goes, oh, holy crap, we could use this to measure and improve our training. We're always trying to tweak it, but we just guess. We just ask people, do you like it more? And again, liking, we've established, is not the right question. And so, yeah, so we've learned a lot. We have subscribers now using this K-12 education. And so from that, I was able to, again, derive some implications. And one of those is that shorter is better. So again, immersion is metabolically costly. Neurons fatigue, just like muscles fatigue. And so Accenture has found what I call the 20-20-20 rule for training, which is nobody speaks for more than 20 minutes. You just, no matter how exciting you are, people are going to lose immersion in that. And then after that max 20 minutes, then they put in some participatory tasks. So I've transmitted some information to you. Now you, and particularly if you have a group of people, like at a table or together, let's do this breakout room and try to apply this task for about 20 minutes. And then the next 20 minutes is on a debrief. Okay, what did the tables learn? Because everyone will have applied this in a slightly different way. So let's have that discussion. They've also found two other things which I think are very interesting. One is that breaks are really important. So they've actually extended the length of breaks. If I'm asking you to really be immersed in this information so it sticks in your brain, I've got to give you a chance to recover. So breaks are important. And the next is that for corporate meetings, what we all feel compelled to do when we organize meetings is everyone go around the room and introduce yourselves.
Yeah.
So Accenture found that the only person that cares is immersed in that experience is the person talking. So literally, I was in New York 2 weeks ago with Accenture's global head of human resources. And so, I don't know, number 5 person in the company, number 6 person. And she said, I'm so happy 5 years ago, we discovered not to do introductions because we save an hour at every meeting we have by not introducing people. And then more generally, you can think about structuring content. So small and immerse, practice it, debrief on what you learned, take a break, come back, do the next task. And also the brain consolidates information overnight. So if I do trainings, I don't do an 8-hour training. I'll do 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, give people an assignment overnight, let that information consolidate, come back the next morning and go, okay, let's see what we learned yesterday as we move on to see what your homework was overnight. That's a much more effective way to stick that information in memory.
Yeah, that's, such a great point, right? We often think that the more we give, the faster we give it, the more people will learn the faster, but unfortunately the brain doesn't work like that, not computer.
Yeah. And we're adults and we've learned to sit on our butts for 8 hours a day and great. The brain doesn't work that way. It's exactly as you said. And so I want to lean into the brain activity. And even that 20-20-20 rule, I should say that Accenture told me recently that they find is actually shorter for online training. And so it's more like 12, 12, and 12, right? So jabbing on like I am, jabbering on, break it up, have more participation, have a chance for questions. We're having a conversation, so I'm not talking hopefully too much. And then as we move into extended reality, I think there's a whole new world there. And that may be different. Maybe in extended reality, people can sustain immersion for 30 minutes or maybe only for 8. But to me, that's a measurement issue. I think once we have the right measurement tool, then we can begin to optimize those experiences so they're individually valuable, but also organizationally create return on investment.
Yeah. We measure and adjust based on the goals that we have, right? What we're trying to achieve and the experience of people. So,
and different leaders, different classes, right? We have the neurodiversity. Even we are different at different times, right? So I think, that staging, I call that readiness or psychological safety, just creating this space. Hey, we're here. Famously Googled this 3-minute eyes closed meditation before meetings. Let's just take a second. 3 minutes or whatever. But, think of VR. There's some wonderful VR meditation applications. What if you had a piece of technology that, your phone dinged you and I don't know, whenever you needed it, it said, hey, take a 5-minute little meditation break in VR where you're walking on the beach or watching a sunrise over the mountains or something. If you were more productive and happier, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I don't have VR experience yet, but my phone does remind me to meditate in the middle of the day with my app.
Great.
That's also, fascinating stuff. I'd like you to extend a little bit more on the education piece about, I read it somewhere, in your book that instead of trying to, again, be more like structured, start with, again, with that immersion, right? Make us care first. And we don't often, do that in our like curriculum of education. Like, let's start at the beginning, this is when it all started, whether that's, exciting or not. Like sometimes we often actually start with the most boring stuff, right? So could you expand on that more, like on that structure, like what's the best?
Perfect. Yeah. So I think, by the way, all the major professional service organizations, I shouldn't mention their name, but they're all using our technology, and they all are down with, as you said, kind of open hot, get me to care, and then do the details. So I'll just give you a concrete example. So for many years, I taught a graduate level math class. This is, theorems and proofs, pretty dry stuff, but I love the history of mathematics. So once we worked on something, I would tell a story about usually some obscure mathematician who developed this technique, or I would bring in props. I would bring in, this is a mathematical probability class. I would bring in like a little mini roulette wheel or giant oversized cards and show them, what the mystery was that this person was trying to solve years ago. And so they had context, right? They had, this is not just a theorem that I have to memorize for some stupid reason. There's a story here, right? There's a story about why this is. So I want to tell the story. So now I've got you to care, and now I'll do the technical part. So I think it's lead with a story would be the takeaway from that.
Yeah. And sometimes, I think often still struggle with that. It's, and I often that my most impactful content is exactly when I manage to bring in the story first, right? But for one reason or the other, sometimes it's harder to do than just, blurt out the information. So just, your book was just a great, reminder for me to, like, if I really care about what I do and I want to help people, just learn, like how to make it immersive for other people, because I don't do it for myself. I'm looking at my notes here.
And one of the most, as you look at those, one of the most effective ways to persuade people is social proof. So the kind of people like us story. So it could be, I had a client just like you. Her name was Karen, and she had the same problem you had. And so let me tell you what I did with Karen. So again, it's very personal. You're using a name, and maybe that's a composite of some previous clients you had or whatever. So I think, thinking about that as a way to facilitate understanding. So we're seeing more and more clinicians, like doctors, using that kind of approach where, hey, I had a patient just like you. His name was Bob. And, he had the same diagnosis you did. And these medicines that I'm, prescribing for you, you're going to feel crappy for 2 weeks. I'm going to tell you that. But after those 2 weeks, your body's going to adapt to that. And we're going to solve this problem that's been nagging you for a long time. So you got to really stick with it. And here's what happened to Bob. He stuck out for the 2 weeks and his something went away or whatever that is. So that's a nice human scale story. I can grasp onto it. I understand it, as opposed to this medication is metabolized in the liver and it's going to blah, blah. You're like, what are you talking about? Right. And that's, I don't know, half the doctors you talk to.
Yes. A lot of scientific communicators are like that, right? They tell you all those scientific details. They're fascinating for them, but for, person on the other side of the screen, not so much.
Right.
I remember, from the book also a couple of things that I think I'm gonna like take away and try to implement in my content. Things like, movement makes us pay attention, right? Or certain like facial expressions, like joy. Also, unusual things seem to make, our immersion peak and make us, curious and just, immersed more. What is it? Another one I think is a great one. Make it novel, but like in familiar context, right? So it's like not too, and I think that has to do with like being relatable to people, right?
So we want the new, but not the too new.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So again, that's like movies. Like you ever hear, how movies are pitched. Well, this is, I don't know, this is Pulp Fiction mixed with, I don't know, Thelma and Louise. I'm making these things up now. Right. So that's the sense in which we want to have a kind of basis where this is something that I liked before, but now there's some novelty to that. And so, and again, that human scale, like I saw those two movies. So if I mash them up, then, you can kind of get what I'm talking about.
Yes. So, Paul, we already went through so many, things and very practical that I think a lot of people would be able to use in their content or, in their marketing to drive more results, to impact more people. Hopefully with, good reason in mind. I think it was, somewhere in your book about that we also have to have responsibility, like, to influence other people. Like, should we, right? To have this kind of like good intention in mind when we're trying to persuade people or influence people. Like, is there a question that you'd like me to ask, but I haven't asked it yet about your book, something that you'd love to share?
Thank you. And thank you for preparing so well. I think, ultimately, when we have these peak immersion experiences, we're building our emotional fitness. And so to be truly flourishing in life, you've got to be physically healthy, but you also have to be emotionally fit. And so if we think about immersive experiences, building our emotional fitness, our ability to really be there for the people around us, to be open to experience, I think that's something that we all do naturally, but we can get better at, just like we can improve our physical fitness. So, even if you're the most selfish person ever and you want to live longer and happier, you need to give to others. And so that's the real surprising result, is that the quality of social relationships is a more important factor at extending your health span than is quitting smoking. Right? That's how important social experiences are. And how do I build that rich social base? I have to give to others. I have to spend time with others. And so I'm a big introvert, Angela. You can't tell because I play an extrovert when I'm being interviewed. But I could spend 12 hours by myself in the lab and be totally happy. And, but I really started investing in social relationships. So some years ago, I turned 50 and I had 4 surprise birthday parties. Not because I'm so awesome, because I invested in relationships where people, I never had that as a kid, right? One birthday party. So I think that's the kind of thing. So if a weirdo Martian introvert like me can actually invest in relationships, it's really about giving. Even like, when you go to lunch and someone picks up the tab, and then, when I think you're younger, you're kind of doing this accounting, like, hey, Bob hasn't paid in 3 weeks. Now I'm like, I'm just happy I'm happy to pay. I don't even care. It doesn't have to be fair. I am honored that there are people who love me, who want to spend time with me. And, think of an old friend who calls you and says, Angela, I love you. You're like, oh man, you're so happy. So you have to give to get the benefits and to be emotionally fit. And it's a weird kind of messed up neuroscience that we have discovered, but it tells us that we're so fundamentally social creatures. And by that I mean neuroanatomically we have so many more receptors for these neurochemicals that immerse us in experiences, immerse us in other people, that we are just hypersensitive. We need social interactions. And so, pretty much the more the better. I mean, I talk in the book about avoiding the neurotic and the unhappy, and that's just going to burn your energy. So, you want to pick is quality of social interactions, but quality and quantity are not unrelated, of course.
Of course, it's like, what was the study about? They assigned students to do some artwork, and they told one part of the participants to do either 1 or 2, something like that, and the other they told, the quality doesn't matter, but do as many as you can, right? And at the end, the quantity translated into quality, and not, the quality wasn't better where they told the people to do 1 artwork, but do it really well. So maybe with relationships and the same, right? The more you practice, the better.
But even recognize that there was a similar study in which I think Dan Ariely did this, in which, and when you were done with your artwork, they put it in a frame and put it on the wall. And then people were so happy. And other people, they tore it up and it's like, we paid you for it and we're going to ruin it. People are so upset. So to me, that just means recognize the people around you. Tell them that you care about them. Invest a little in those experiences and try to do something amazing and awesome once in a while. There's a part in the book about, paying for really, really good meals. So you don't want to do it all the time because it's really, the difference in immersion is not that high. But once in a while, stretch your brain, go bungee jumping, go skydiving, go, I don't know, do something really awesome and different. Your brain
Mm-hmm.
loves it. And it's good to build up those muscles where you're just totally neurologic muscles, I mean, where you're totally
Yeah.
focused on that task.
Immersed. Yeah. Oh, one last question that kind of came into my mind while you were talking. Um, I noticed that a lot of people kind of afraid to get deeper with their emotions, meaning to, I don't know, share more, to open up more. Do you have any insights of like why that can be the case for a lot of people? It's like they don't feel safe, or what's the underlying reason you think?
Very good question. And let me try to answer it briefly, but completely. One is genetic effects. So people who tend to be more anxious, more neurotic, they just don't feel like opening up as much. The second is environmental. So if I grew up in an unstable environment where it's not safe to be emotionally open, then I tend to be more closed. And all this, is changeable at some level. And the third is the setting that you're in. So if I'm in I don't know if I'm in Kiev, Ukraine, with bullets going by, I am not going to be the super nicest person. I'm going to be ducking, right? If I'm in, I don't know, someplace safe, I'm walking around London, I'm totally relaxed, right? Generally it's safe. I don't want to be stupid, but the setting is comfortable. And so I can, I remember last time I was in London, meeting a lady. I'd done her podcast actually. And she said, "You want to have tea?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so, walked across London, had tea with a strange person. And we sort of knew each other online. And so, that's totally fine. But, would you meet a strange person, from, I don't know, in Lagos, Nigeria, that you met online? "Hey, I'm going to be in Nigeria. Yeah, come to my house." And I'm like, I don't think I would do that. Right. So the setting matters. So that's the staging part, right?
Yes,
so if you want to have those, so there's going to be individual variation. You talked about neural diversity. We're all diverse. Even ourselves are going to change, but create an environment where it's comfortable, where people feel relaxed, offer people snacks or a coffee or something, and create an environment where they can open up. But you can do that by opening up yourself. I mean, not if it's weird and inappropriate, but if you know that person. I think that like, "How are you?" is the most worst thing to say about someone you care about. I have to say, "Angela, how's your life going? What's happening today? What's making you happy? What's making you sad?" Like, ask that question. Even if you're at work, a supervisor, and talk about this in the book, if you're not taking in that emotional information from people, you are not a good leader, because much of what we do is emotional. So but don't expect everyone every day to be totally open. Even people in our families, our friends that we love, sometimes you're just having a bad day and you want to be left alone. That's okay.
Yeah.
We've done it. I've done it. You've done it. I'm sure,
Yeah.
And then later on you can say, "Hey, I'm sorry, dear one. I was having a bad day yesterday. I probably was cranky, and it's not you, it's me, and just, whatever, give me some space." So that's, I think, being emotionally aware as well, which is hard when you're young. I think for, teenage years through, I don't know, your brain doesn't finish wiring up to you're about 30. So, if you're under 30, you're going to be a weirdo anyway.
Yeah. I think only now, I'm 35, I finally got to a point where I'm emotionally aware. And when I feel like it's not, the best day to communicate with me, especially about challenging subjects, I tell it upfront to the person who's approaching me. I'm not at my best, and if somebody asks me, "Are you okay?" Like, not really, I'm actually like not trying to seem like what I'm not. And then the person is then aware, okay, yeah, maybe, today is not the best day, and they don't take it personally.
And also for listeners, by the way, talk about persuasion, that vulnerability that you show, it's very appealing. So we generally dislike people who come off as too perfect, too beautiful, like, oh, but if you say, like, I'm having a bit of a tough day, I'm gonna do the best I can, but give me a little bit of freedom here, because I didn't sleep, or my dog died, or my kid's sick. We all understand that, and it's so human. I think Zoom, I think the lockdowns in Zoom did that, where people are just wearing casual clothes. I don't need to wear a tie. It's fine. This is my real life. I'm really at home. I got nothing to hide. It's my real hair. I don't know, whatever those things are. I did shave today for you, so
I'm wearing a white shirt.
Yeah, I know. You look so nice. I just wore a sweatshirt. So I think, once we humanize this, it's really very nice and improves those relationships. I've been really thinking at work, right? We're at work. I think we were told in the old days, there's like a work you, and then there's a personal you. Really? There's just a you. And if you're spending so much energy to put on this facade, then you're not engaged in your work. You're not having a great time. So we are who we are. I mean, I'm not saying, wear dirty clothes and burp all day or something, but, it's okay.
Yes.
We're just human.
Yeah, we're just human. I think that's a beautiful way to finish our podcast, right? We went through so many things. I feel like this podcast was so dense, even though it wasn't that long, right? And maybe it's because of what you do, you kind of know how to create that experience. But yeah, Paul, thank you so much for this podcast, for your time, and for all your work. It's transforming me already. And I hope, our listeners also will be transformed just by listening to this podcast, hopefully not one time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. I'm at your service anytime.
Yeah. And one last question. Where should our listeners go to learn more about your work? Where would you like them to go? Like check out this book, work, website, social media?
Yes, you can see the Immersion platform at getimmersion.com, immersion with an I. Kind of more about me at pauljzak.com. And the book's available on Amazon and anywhere you want to buy books. Oh, the audiobook just came out with a really wonderful voice actor reading it. So if you like audio, this guy's great. A lot of my
friends do. Yeah. What about social? Are you on social media?
Yeah, Twitter, Paul J. Zak, and LinkedIn, and reach out. If anything I said sounds either interesting or insane, then shoot me a note and tell me, and happy to engage with your listeners.
Yeah. And I'm going to link all of it, so it's easy for people to click and do the right thing. So again, Paul, thank you. It was transformational. Love your work, and going to be reading your books over and over again. So thank you. Really appreciate
awesome.
you.
Thank you, Angela. Bye.
Thank you, Paul. Bye.